Hey everybody, it's Dr. Vandermark here. Want to say that as we get into these PowerPoint overviews, that these are not all inclusive. In other words, I'm providing an overview of the material in the chapters, or the modules they call them, but not necessarily covering everything that could be on the quiz. So please remember to be prepared for the quiz, review the material in the text, and review it pretty closely. Because the quizzes are challenging, and they get more challenging throughout the course. The quizzes are written by the authors, and they're written at the graduate level. So I'm going to give you an overview, sort of a mini lecture, but there is more in the text, so please be sure to see that. Okay, here we go. The agenda, what we're going to be talking about, what I'll be talking about here in the next several minutes, is the world of paradox, the evolution of management models, the competing values framework, and what they call the ALAPA learning process, and the core competency of thinking critically. So, managing in the world of paradox. What is a paradox? Is when we're pulled in two different directions at the same time. You maybe have heard the phrase, being with you is a love-hate relationship. I love you and hate you at the same time. The whole notion of managing a team. I want to be on the team. I want to be an individual, but I want to be a team player at the same time. So paradoxes are things that they compete with each other and don't seem to have a solution because they're pretty tricky. One paradox in the world of language is the phrase "I am lying." Just the phrase "I am lying." Well, if I am lying, then the phrase the words "I am lying" can't be true. And so if it's not true, it means I'm telling the truth that I'm lying, but I can't be telling the truth because I am lying. So paradoxes occur in language and even in mathematics sometimes, in nature, and certainly in organizations. And you can read more about paradoxes in the text. Let's see, why do effective managers need to transcend why do effective managers need to transcend paradox? Because paradox is everywhere. How can you cause people to collaborate and be individualistic? How can you give them flexibility and also control them? So it's these types of behaviors, and you'll see them as management models that occur, that lead us to kind of tricky situations as managers. And what the authors are saying is you have to be good at dealing with all these different paradoxes, and they show up in different models or different forms. And why is learning a lifelong process? Well, it's probably pretty straightforward by now in your own work, is that learning never stops. We as adults continue learning throughout all of our lives. Let's see, here we go. Evolution of management models. What is a management model? It's just a way of looking at behavior. You can look at this in the text. Why do management models change over time? What happens to old ones, and so on. And here are the foundational management models used by our author. And you can see the development of these models over time from 1900 all the way through today, post-2000. And the rational model became popular first, and then the human relations model. You can see the rational model right down here, and then as time went by, we got, well, we need to pay attention to human beings and organizations, and so this human relations model developed, and that's this one right here, the yellow one. And then in about the 50s to the 70s, this open systems model, that you have to think of an organization as a living, breathing, changing system. And then the both and assumptions, competing values frameworks, is we kind of have to be all of those. And that developed and led us to where we are now, today, into this utilizing the competing values framework, all of these, with complexity, ambiguity, and paradox, which is, of course, what we're going to see here soon. Okay, let's look at each one. Human relations model is in yellow, and the way to read this is look over here, number one, the criteria for effectiveness. How do you know it's working? Because this is happening over here on the other side. So number one, the criteria for effectiveness for the human relations model is that commitment and cohesion happen. That means, hey, if I use this approach, then I get this. The means to the end theory means if I have people who are involved, that the results are commitment. So involvement results in commitment. People who get involved commit. The action imperative then means this is what I have to get people to do collaborate in order to get the involvement that I need and the commitment and the cohesion that I believe is necessary as an effective manager. My emphasis then is on participation, conflict resolution, consensus building, and so on, and the culture that we develop. According to our authors, they call it a clan. Human relations model. Okay. The next model, the internal process model, is a little bit different. Okay, as we move down through each of these 4 competing values. Now the criteria for effectiveness is not, if you remember here, commitment and cohesion. Here it's stability and control. All right, stability and control, whether there's cohesion or not. This model says what we need is stability and control. Or excuse me, stability and continuity, which we need control to do that. The ends to the means, or the means to the ends, is how do we get that? We use rationalization or routinization. We set up routines that lead to stability. We kind of try to operate like a machine. We create a good, strong machine. The action imperative is control the machine. The emphasis is defining the responsibility, measure things, document things, and the culture that we have is a hierarchy. One of the most popular approaches to management today. We want stability. We want continuity. We want things to be routine or routinization. That gives us the stability. The action imperative, we have to control things, and that of course includes people. The emphasis is on defining responsibility, measurement, and documentation of the things that people do and the outcomes that they develop, I guess. And we call that a hierarchy. All right, so that is the internal process approach. Next, the rational approach, the rational goal model. Now the criteria of effectiveness is productivity and profitability. Remember here it was stability and continuity. Here it was commitment and cohesion. In this model, productivity, profitability. The means to the end, clear direction leads to productive outcomes. Be very clear, be very rational. Out here the action imperative is competition or competing, and this can be competition from within. Here we're defining responsibilities. Here we're looking for participation. Here we're actually looking for competition within the organization and outside of the organization, obviously. How do we get that? We clarify goals. We use rational analysis, lots of logical thinking. We take action. And the culture here is called the market culture, mainly due to this notion of competition or competing. And finally is this open systems model, change and adaptability. Now we're saying, well, we can't just hold to what was predictable and stable. Now we have to deal with things that are not predictable and not stable. We have to deal with being able to change a lot. How do we do that? What's the means to the end? We're continually adapting. Think of iPhone. And think of the iPhone or Apple. Think of Google. Think of high-tech companies that are continually adapting. You know, what's going to follow the iWatch? Well, I don't know. But you can leave it to Apple to know that they will change, they will adapt, they will continue to lead. They will acquire and maintain whatever external resources, money, people they need to do it. They will create something new. They will adapt. The emphasis is on political adaptation within and outside of the organization. Creative problem solving. There's innovation, monstrous for Apple, Google, high-tech companies. And managing the change that occurs as they go through waves and waves of changing not only who they are as an organization, but what they're doing, what they're creating, and so on. That culture is called an adhocracy. Okay. Core assumptions of the competing value framework. This is what the authors are saying here is that effective managers must simultaneously embrace all 4 of those models in order to be effective. You have to buy into all 4 of them. The human relations model, the open systems model, the internal process model, and the rational model at the same time, even though they compete with one another. Here's a very important caveat. The authors are saying effective managers, from the competing values perspective, may not be successful in organizations that operate based on the assumptions of only 1 or 2 of the models. In other words, if you try to apply all 4 models in some organizations, let's say the military, which probably holds to something we would call I would expect open systems and rational, or maybe internal process and rational models won't work. You can't maybe use the human relations model in a military setting in the same way that you could use it in a non-military setting. Notice the competing values here. I want to be flexible, but I want to be in control. Right? Flexibility, change, control, stability. I want to be internal and external at the same time. And this is what creates this paradox, is how can you do both? The authors believe that there is a necessary need for master managers to have a high degree of cognitive complexity. That means must be a critical thinker. We'll look at critical thinking competencies. But you have to be able to shift how you think based on all the different values and the competing values in this paradoxical arrangement that they have. And you have to acquire and use these competencies that are associated with each of these. So let's take a look at the competencies. And throughout the course, you'll have an opportunity each module to assess, actually each week, to assess your competencies in each of these areas. So the first area is look at was collaboration. Remember, this is the human relations model. This is the open systems model. This is the internal process model. And this is the rational model. So, from the perspective of a human relations manager, your competencies would include these. Take a look at these. Seems reasonable, right? But you should also be good at, now the red means the internal process model. You should be good at these competencies. Moving forward, blue is the rational model, so you should also be good at these competencies. And finally, green is the open systems model. You should be good at these competencies. All right. Again, you'll have the opportunity to assess yourself at all of these competencies as we move week by week throughout the course. Shift now to organizing the learning process. See this ALAPA, ALAPA. That model, this 5-step ALAPA model, was developed by Wetton and Cameron, and it is discussed in the introductory chapter to our text. So be sure you understand what they mean by this. That first we assess, then we learn, then we analyze, then we practice, then we apply. Core competency, thinking critically. What do critical thinkers do? First, they develop what is the grounds. In other words, what observable facts are consistent with your claim. If I say women are better managers than men, and somebody says, okay, prove it, and I go, I just think they are, then I'm not thinking critically. I'm just offering my opinion, my assumption, my bias. Anybody can do that. However, if someone says, okay, what observable facts are consistent with your claim? And I say, well, you know, there were a number of important scientific studies of the differences between competencies found among female managers versus male managers, and they found a number of interpersonal competencies that are predictably more present among women than men. Then I am warranting, I am providing the facts that substantiate my claim. And then finally I say, what is the point that I want to make? Well, the point that I want to make is that in some cases maybe we need female managers rather than male managers. And I'm kind of just making this up, but the whole idea with critical thinking is you go beyond just your assumptions and your personal beliefs and offer some substantiation. So, competing values framework recap. Again, take a look at this in the chapter in the reading. How is the competing values framework similar to earlier management models or different? from earlier management models. What are the two underlying dimensions of the competing values framework? What is behavioral complexity? What are the action imperatives? I went through each of those. How do action imperatives differ from the competencies? You saw the competencies and the action imperatives, so it'd be important for you to know the difference. That's the end of the show, folks. That covers the introductory chapter to our text. See you in the next module.